After my wife died, the landlord of the house she had been renting called me unexpectedly. "Come here right now," he said. "I've found something you need to see, and whatever you do, don't tell anyone." He sounded nervous, almost afraid. I didn't ask why. I just got in my car and drove straight there, my heart pounding the entire way. When I opened the door, what I saw made me stumble backward. The room spun, and I nearly collapsed where I stood. I'm truly grateful you're still here with me. Before we continue, take a moment to leave a comment and tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it where you are right now? It means more than you know, and I read every single one. Also, please note, this story includes some fictional elements added for entertainment and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real names or settings is purely coincidental, but the message I'm sharing with you is meaningful and worth hearing. 3 days after we buried Beverly, I sat in our living room, staring at the empty recliner across from mine. 45 years of marriage, and now the silence was so thick I could taste it. The house felt wrong without her, like walking into a room and forgetting why you came, except the forgetting never stopped. I kept replaying the funeral in my mind. The faces, some I recognized, some I didn't. The endless condolences that all sounded the same after a while. The awful finality of watching them lower her casket into the frozen February ground, while a pastor who'd never met Beverly read generic words about eternal rest. But something else kept nagging at me. My daughter Angela and her husband Chad had arrived late. I'd been standing at the graveside with the rest of the family when I heard car doors slam in the parking lot. They hurried across the cemetery. Angela's heels sinking into the soft earth, Chad gripping her elbow like he was holding her upright. They slipped into the back row just as the pastor began. During my eulogy, I'd looked out at the gathered mourners and caught Angela's eye. She'd looked away immediately, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. Chad stood rigid beside her, jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle working even from 20 feet away. He didn't cry, didn't even seem to be listening, just stared at the casket with an expression I couldn't quite read. At the reception afterward, they'd left within an hour. Dad needs his rest. Angela had said, though I'd said no such thing. What I needed was my family around me. What I needed was to not feel like I'd been carved hollow and left to echo. But they were gone before I could finish my second cup of coffee, my son-in-law practically dragging Angela out the door. Now it was day 3, and I still hadn't heard from them. No calls, no texts, nothing. The phone rang shrill in the silent house. I almost let it go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to hear another neighbor tell me how sorry they were, how Beverly was in a better place now. As if anyone knew where the hell that better place was supposed to be. But I picked up anyway, old habits. Mr. Sterling. The voice was familiar, but formal. Edward Collins, our landlord who owned the Collins building where we'd run Sterling Antiques for the past decade. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I found something. Something urgent that Beverly left with me before she passed." My pulse kicked up. What kind of something? I can't say over the phone. Edward's voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. "You need to come to my office, the Collins building above the antique shop. Can you come now?" "Edward, I don't think I'm up for—" "Mr. Sterling, please." There was something in his voice that cut through my fog of grief. Fear, maybe, or urgency. "And sir, don't tell Angela or Chad that you're coming." I sat up straighter. "Why the hell not?" "Because Beverly made me promise. She said—" He paused, and I heard him take a shaky breath. "She said your life might depend on it." The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to break free. 72 years old, and I could still feel adrenaline dump into my system the way it used to in Vietnam when someone yelled, "Incoming." This could be a trap. Some elaborate con targeting a grieving widower. At my age, I wasn't the soldier I'd been 50 years ago. My knees creaked when I stood up, and I got winded climbing stairs. If someone wanted to hurt me, now would be the time. But Edward had said Beverly's name, had said she'd left something with him. And that phrase, "your life might depend on it," those weren't words you used lightly. If there was even a chance this was real, I had to go. I pushed myself out of my chair joints, protesting, and looked around the living room one more time. Beverly's reading glasses still sat on the end table beside her chair. Her book, some mystery novel about a murder on a train, lay open bookmark holding her place. She'd never finish it now, unless, no. I shook my head. She was gone. I'd watched them close the casket, watched them lower it into the ground, thrown a handful of frozen earth onto the polished wood and heard it rattle like bones. But I grabbed my coat anyway. The afternoon air hit me like a slap. When I stepped outside, cold enough to burn my lungs, gray sky, threatening snow. I fumbled with my car keys, hands shaking from something that wasn't entirely the cold. If this was a trap, so be it. I'd been a soldier once. I'd faced down things worse than whatever waited for me at the Collins building. And if it wasn't a trap, if Beverly had really left something for me, some message or explanation, or goodbye, I hadn't gotten at the hospital, then I owed it to her memory to find out what. I slid behind the wheel and started the engine. What I didn't know as I pulled out of the driveway and headed toward downtown was that everything I thought I knew about my wife's death was about to shatter. And the man I'd been 3 days ago, the grieving widower ready to fade quietly into old age, was about to go to war one last time. 20 minutes later, I stood at the foot of a narrow staircase that climbed up the back of the Collins building. The steps looked steeper than I remembered, or maybe I'd just gotten older. My hand found the wooden railing, whether from age or nerves, I honestly couldn't tell. Every instinct I'd honed in the jungles of Vietnam 50 years ago was screaming that something was off, or maybe impossibly that something was finally right. I took the first step, then another. My knees protested each one, that familiar grinding ache that came with 7 decades of wear and tear. The stairwell smelled like furniture polish, and old books, a scent that hit me like a physical blow. Beverly's scent. She'd spent 30 years running Sterling Antiques in this building we'd rented from Edward, and somehow the smell of her work had soaked into these walls and refused to leave, just like her memory refused to leave my mind. The second-floor hallway was dim, lit by a single bulb that cast long shadows. Edward's office door stood slightly ajar at the end. No light came from inside. For half a second, I considered turning around, going home, pretending this phone call had never happened. But I'd driven all the way here, and I'd been a soldier once. We didn't retreat just because we were scared. I pushed the door open. Edward stood by the window, silhouetted against the gray afternoon light, filtering through dusty glass. He turned when I entered, and I caught something in his expression I'd never seen before. Not quite fear, not quite excitement. Something in between that made my pulse jump. "Hey, Mr. Sterling," he said quietly. "Thank you for coming." "All right, Edward." I stepped fully into the office and let the door swing shut behind me. "What's this about? What did Beverly leave?" Movement. Behind Edward in the shadows near the filing cabinets, something shifted. Someone, a woman, stepped into the light. My knees gave out. I grabbed for the doorframe, fingers scrabbling against wood lungs, forgetting how to pull in air. My brain couldn't process what my eyes were telling it, couldn't bridge the gap between what I knew to be true and what I was seeing. Beverly, my wife, alive, standing 3 feet away from me like she'd just stepped out to run an errand and come back with groceries. "Douglas," she whispered. Her voice broke something loose in my chest. Tears, Christ, I hadn't cried at the funeral, hadn't let myself. But now they came hot and fast, blurring my vision. She was crying too, those same tears I'd seen 1,000 times over 45 years. Happy tears, sad tears, angry tears. I knew every variation, and these were all of them at once. I don't remember crossing the room. 1 second I was frozen in the doorway with my heart trying to hammer through my ribs, and the next I had my arms around her, solid, real, warm. I felt her heartbeat against my chest, that steady rhythm I'd fallen asleep listening to for decades. Felt her breath against my neck. Felt her hands grip the back of my shirt, like she was afraid I might disappear if she let go. She was real. She was alive. How? The word came out strangled. I pulled back just enough to see her face, to touch her cheek, to prove to myself this wasn't some grief-induced hallucination. I watched them lower the casket. I threw dirt on it. The funeral, everyone was there. How? She cupped my face in her hands. Those hands. I'd held them on our wedding day. Held them when Angela was born. When our son Nicholas came 2 years later. Held them in hospital waiting rooms and at kitchen tables and across restaurant booths for 45 years. Hands I thought I'd never feel again. I had to fake it, Douglas. Her voice was steady now, fierce in a way I'd almost forgotten she could be. They were going to kill me, just like they killed Nicholas. The world tilted sideways. What? I couldn't make sense of the words. They were in English. I understood English, but the meaning wouldn't stick. Nicholas, no, the police said. And our son didn't take his own life. Beverly's eyes locked onto mine, and there was something in them that made my blood run cold. Certainty. Absolute, unshakable certainty. Nicholas was murdered, and I have proof. She moved away from me, and that hurt, losing contact, like tearing off a bandage, and walked to Edward's desk. Picked up something I hadn't noticed before. A journal, leather-bound, worn at the edges with writing on the cover in handwriting I'd recognize anywhere. Nicholas's handwriting. That careful, precise script he'd learned from me when I taught him to keep a field journal at age 12. Always write clearly, son, I'd told him. Someday your life might depend on someone being able to read what you wrote. Jesus Christ. Had his life depended on it? Chad killed Nicholas, Beverly said, and the words landed like punches. My son-in-law. The man who'd married my daughter 7 years ago. The man who'd stood at Nicholas's funeral and dabbed at his eyes with a handkerchief. That Chad, no. I shook my head. That's Chad wouldn't. He did. Beverly's voice was iron. And then he tried to kill me. But I figured it out in time. She crossed back to me, holding the journal like it contained something both precious and terrible. Edward stayed by the window, silent, giving us this moment. This is Nicholas's, Beverly said softly. He kept it hidden. Documented everything he found. Everything Chad did. She looked up at me, and I saw 45 years of marriage in her eyes. All the trust, all the love, all the partnership that had carried us through raising kids and burying parents and building a life together. Douglas, I need you to read this. I need you to know the truth about what happened to our son. She placed the journal in my hands. My fingers closed around it, automatically feeling the worn leather, the weight of it. I looked down at Nicholas's handwriting on the cover. His name, his dates, and below that in smaller letters, the truth. I stood there in Edward Collins's dusty office holding my dead son's journal, staring at my supposedly dead wife, and felt the last 3 days hell, the last 2 years crack open like an egg. Everything I'd believed about Nicholas's death, everything I'd grieved over, everything I'd accepted as truth, all of it was a lie. I couldn't take my eyes off Nicholas's handwriting. My son's words written in the weeks before his death, before his murder. The distinction mattered now in a way that made my chest ache. Beverly guided me to a chair. I hadn't realized my legs were shaking until I sat down. Edward moved quietly to the office door and turned the lock. The click echoed in the small space. Read it, Beverly said softly. Then I'll explain everything. My hands trembled as I opened the journal. The pages were filled with Nicholas's careful script, the same methodical documentation I'd taught him when he was 12. A soldier keeps records, I'd told him. Facts matter. Details save lives. He'd remembered. Week 1. Found discrepancies in sterling manufacturing accounts. $12,000 missing from quarterly reports. Week 3. Traced payments to Chad's personal account. He's been embezzling for at least 2 years. Deposits match up with company losses. Week 6, confirmed total $287,000 stolen. Found betting slips in Chad's desk drawer when I stopped by their house. Heavy losses. He's got a gambling problem, bad one. My vision blurred. I blinked hard and kept reading. Week 8, confronted Chad today at his office. Gave him 48 hours to come clean to Dad and pay it back. He begged for more time. Said he owed money to someone dangerous. Started crying. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The entry was dated 3 days before Nicholas died. The next page was blank. I looked up at Beverly. She was watching me with an expression I'd seen before. The same one she'd worn when we'd gotten the call about Nicholas's death 2 years ago. Except this time she wasn't crying. This time she looked like granite. He gave Chad a chance. I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Nicholas tried to help him. And Chad killed him for it. Beverly moved to the chair across from me. Edward stayed by the door, silent as a sentinel. Douglas, everything the police said about Nicholas, the gambling, the embezzlement, the pills, it was all Chad. He framed our son to cover his own crimes. How do you know? Even as I asked, I was staring at the journal in my lap. The evidence was right here. But I needed to hear her say it. Needed to understand how this had happened under our noses. Beverly pulled a manila folder from Edward's desk. 6 months ago, I found Nicholas's journal hidden in his old apartment. The landlord was finally clearing out his storage unit. I'd been putting it off going through Nicholas's things, but something made me go that day. She opened the folder and I saw photographs, bank statements, copies of betting slips, all with Chad's name on them. See, I hired a private investigator, Beverly continued. Through Edward, someone discreet who could verify what Nicholas had found. Everything checked out, Edward said quietly. Chad embezzled $287,000 over 27 months. He owed $300,000 to a loan shark named Anthony DeLuca. DeLuca runs operations out of Chicago gambling loans collections. When Nicholas discovered the embezzlement, Chad saw only one way out: Anthony DeLuca. I filed the name away, adding it to the growing list of people who'd touched my son's death. The investigator found the truth about that night, Beverly said. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the tremor underneath. She'd practiced this speech, I realized. Rehearsed it over and over while I'd been home grieving, not knowing she was alive. Chad visited Nicholas's apartment, brought an expensive bottle of wine, Nicholas's favorite Cabernet. They talked. Chad convinced Nicholas to have a drink while they worked things out. The wine was drugged, I said. It wasn't a question. Sleeping pills. Enough to kill him. Beverly's hands clenched into fists on her knees. Chad made Nicholas drink it. Then he waited. When Nicholas was unconscious, Chad staged the scene, planted the fake betting receipts, wrote the suicide note on Nicholas's computer, called 911 at 3 a.m. crying, saying he'd stopped by to check on his brother-in-law and found him unresponsive. I felt rage building in my chest, like a living thing, hot and volcanic. The police believed him. Everyone believed him, Edward said. Chad played the devastated family member perfectly, and with the planted evidence pointing to Nicholas as the embezzler and gambler, the police closed the case as suicide. Cut and dried. I believed it too. The words tasted like ash. I thought my son was a thief. I thought he was weak enough to... I couldn't finish the sentence. Beverly's hand found mine across the space between our chairs. Chad counted on that. He destroyed Nicholas's reputation to cover his own sins, and it worked. Until I found the journal. Why didn't you come to me right away? The question came out sharper than I'd intended. 6 months, Beverly. You've known for 6 months. Her expression shifted. Guilt, regret, something that looked like shame. Because I made a mistake. I confronted Chad myself. I thought... She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I thought I could reason with him, get him to confess, maybe even turn himself in. Jesus Christ, Beverly. I know. She held up a hand. I know how stupid that sounds now. But I wasn't thinking clearly. Our son's murderer was married to our daughter. I thought if I could just make him see reason, maybe I could spare Angela from what? The truth. My voice rose. Chad killed Nicholas, and you thought you could talk him into admitting it. Oh, I was wrong. Beverly's voice cracked. 2 weeks ago, I overheard him on the phone. He was in the study, didn't know I was in the hallway. He told someone, the old lady knows too much, just like Nicholas. We'll handle it the same way. The room went silent except for my harsh breathing. He tried to kill you, I said. He put something in my afternoon tea. I saw him do it, caught his reflection in the kitchen window. Beverly's voice steadied again. I'd been watching him for days by then, waiting for him to make a move. Edward and I had already put together a plan with Dr. James Peterson. James Peterson. I knew that name. The cardiologist, old friend from medical school, Beverly said. I called him, told him everything. He agreed to help me stage my death. Edward spoke up. The drug Chad used was designed to cause what would look like a natural heart attack. Fast-acting. Hard to detect in a standard toxicology screen. He'd planned it carefully. But I was ready, Beverly said. I switched my teacup with one containing a specialized sedative Dr. Peterson provided. It mimicked death closely enough to fool the paramedics and the initial coroner's examination. James signed the death certificate himself. I stared at my wife, the woman I'd been married to for 45 years, who I thought I'd known inside and out. She'd faked her own death, planned an elaborate deception, and let me grieve for 3 days while she hid in Edward Collins's office. Now, you let me bury an empty casket, I said. I let you stay alive. Her eyes blazed. If Chad knew I'd survived, he would have tried again, and he would have made sure of it the second time. This way he thinks he won. He thinks he's gotten away with murdering both our son and his mother-in-law. I stood up abruptly. The chair scraped backward with a harsh screech. I'm going to kill him. No. Beverly was on her feet too, grabbing my arm with surprising strength. That's exactly what he wants. You attack him, he claims self-defense, plays the victim again. We need to be smarter than that. Smarter. I could barely control my voice. He murdered our son. He tried to murder you. How much smarter do we need to be? She's smart enough to make him confess, Beverly said. On record. With evidence that will hold up in court and clear Nicholas's name once and for all. She walked to Edward's desk and picked up a small digital recorder. No bigger than a deck of cards. Edward produced a tiny microphone from a drawer. Beverly slid both devices across the desk toward me. Are you ready to go to war, Douglas? I looked at the equipment. Looked at my wife, my living, breathing, fierce wife who'd outsmarted a killer and come back from the dead to get justice for our son. I felt something click into place inside me. Something I hadn't felt since Vietnam. Since the last time someone had asked me if I was ready to fight. Tell me the plan. We spent the next 3 hours turning Edward's cramped office into a war room. The sun had set outside, throwing long shadows across the desk, where we'd spread Nicholas's journal, legal documents, and surveillance equipment. I felt something I hadn't felt in decades, not since my last tour in Vietnam. Purpose. Clear, focused purpose. "Here's what we're going to do," I said, standing at Edward's desk, like I was back in a command tent planning reconnaissance missions. The old instincts hadn't left. They'd just been waiting. Dormant. But we need three things: opportunity, evidence, and an exit strategy. Beverly watched me from her chair, and I caught that expression I remembered from our early years together. Pride mixed with concern, the same look she'd given me when I'd re-enlisted for my second tour, knowing she couldn't stop me but wishing she could. The opportunity. I continued pulling out a legal pad Edward had provided. "Is attorney Jeffrey Matthews. Edward, you know him right. Handled the Sterling Antiques lease paperwork." "Good man," Edward confirmed. "Discreet, trustworthy." Perfect. You'll arrange for him to visit my house tomorrow afternoon. He'll present a fake will, Beverly's supposed final wishes." I sketched out the basic framework. "Down inside a trust fund worth $2.5 million in my name. But here's the hook: it comes with a competency requirement." "Competency requirement?" Edward leaned forward. "If I'm found mentally incompetent within 6 months by a licensed medical professional, the trust freezes for 10 years. But if I maintain competency, I have full control of the funds." I looked at Beverly. "Chad will see dollar signs. Big ones. He'll need me functional enough to sign papers and make decisions, but vulnerable enough to manipulate." Beverly's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "He'll have to keep you alive and seemingly healthy. It buys us time." "Exactly." I moved to the second point on my mental checklist. While he's playing the devoted son-in-law, I'll be gathering evidence. These recording devices. I picked up the equipment Beverly had produced. I'll plant them myself throughout the house. Bedroom, living room, kitchen. Old spy tradecraft from the service. Hide them in vents under furniture places Chad won't think to look. "That's the evidence component," Edward said. "What about the exit strategy? A code word." I pulled out my own phone, an old flip model I'd refused to upgrade. "If things go sideways, if I'm in real danger, I'll text you a specific phrase: Beverly's roses need watering. That's your signal to call Detective Richard Anderson immediately." "Anderson," Beverly frowned. "The one who investigated Nicholas's death." "The same. He's the only cop who seemed skeptical about the suicide ruling. Called me twice after the case closed, asking if I was sure Nicholas had been acting depressed." I remembered those conversations now with new understanding. Anderson's instincts had been right. I think he suspected something was off but couldn't prove it. "He'll listen to us when the time comes." Edward made a note. "I'll keep my phone on 24 hours. Anderson's direct line. I'll get it to you." I turned to Beverly. "Which brings me to the hardest part of this plan. You have to stay hidden. Here with Edward. No contact with anyone outside this room. Douglas, if Chad knows you're alive, we lose everything." I kept my voice firm. "He'll run. Or worse, he'll come after both of us with nothing to lose. Right now, he thinks he's won. He thinks he's safe. That's our advantage." Beverly stood and crossed to me. "You're asking me to let you walk into danger while I hide like a coward. I'm asking you to trust me." I took her hands. "I was a soldier once. This is what I'm trained for. Infiltration, intelligence gathering, knowing when to strike." I squeezed her fingers. Can you trust me to do this?" She searched my eyes for a long moment. After 45 years of marriage, she could read me like a book, every tell, every bluff, every truth. "You're not just doing this for justice," she said quietly. "You're doing this for revenge." I didn't deny it. "I'm doing this for Nicholas, for you, for every day I believed our son was something he wasn't." My voice roughened. "But yes, I want Chad to know he failed. I want him to see me standing when he expected me broken." Beverly pulled me into an embrace. her head tucked perfectly under my chin the way it had for decades. "Be careful. I just got you back. I can't lose you for real." "You won't," I promised, though we both knew I couldn't guarantee that. Edward cleared his throat diplomatically. "One more thing, Mr. Sterling. This Nokia phone." He produced a basic model from his desk drawer. "It's prepaid, untraceable. Beverly and I are the only ones with the number. Text us updates. Never call unless it's a genuine emergency. If Chad searches your regular phone, he won't find anything suspicious." I took the Nokia and felt its weight in my palm. Cold. Solid. Like carrying a sidearm again. "What's your cover story?" Beverly asked. "How will you act a grief-stricken widower barely functional?" I let my shoulders slump, my face go slack. The transformation took seconds. I'd learned it in POW training. How to look beaten when you weren't. How to seem weak when you were gathering strength. "I'll shuffle when I walk. Forget things. Seem lost without you." I straightened back up. "They'll think I'm an easy target. They have no idea they're the ones being hunted." Beverly touched my face. "Tomorrow morning you walk back into that house and become someone you're not." "No." I caught her hand, pressed it against my cheek. "Tomorrow I become exactly who I've always been. A soldier, a father, a husband who won't let his family's killer walk free." We sealed the plan with a long kiss. Might be our last. I refused to think that way, but the possibility hung between us like smoke. Beverly held my face in her hands one more time. "I've trusted you for 45 years, Douglas Sterling. I'm not stopping now." I left Edward's office as the clock struck 9. The streets were empty, cold February air biting through my coat. Tomorrow morning, I'd drive back to that house, the one I'd shared with Beverly for 30 years. The one where Chad and Angela were probably already making themselves comfortable, thinking they were safe. Tomorrow, I'd walk through that door and perform the role of my life. The broken old man, the grieving widower, the easy mark. They thought they'd won. They thought I was just a 72-year-old man with creaking knees and fading memories. They had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I drove home slowly, rehearsing every detail. Each turn of the steering wheel felt like I was navigating toward my own funeral. The Douglas Sterling. They knew the one who'd buried his wife 3 days ago. The one who shuffled through life in a fog of grief was about to take center stage. Or at least that's what they needed to believe. Angela's car sat in my driveway when I pulled in. I frowned genuinely this time, not part of the act. I hadn't invited her to stay over. I parked and made myself shuffle toward the front door, letting my shoulders sag my gait, uncertain. An old man broken by loss. The door swung open before I could touch the handle. Dad. Angela rushed out, throwing her arms around me. Her perfume hit me like a wall, too sweet, too strong, like she'd bathed in it. "We were so worried. Where did you go?" Over her shoulder, I spotted Chad standing in my living room, in my house. His smile was perfectly calibrated, concerned son-in-law, worried family member. But his eyes didn't match. They were calculating, measuring, just driving around. I mumbled, letting confusion cloud my voice. Needed to clear my head. "You shouldn't be alone right now, Dad." Chad stepped forward, smooth as oil. "Angela and I talked about it. We're going to stay here for a while. Help you adjust to everything." I blinked slowly, as if processing this information took real effort. Inside, every alarm bell I'd developed in Vietnam was screaming. They'd moved in. Already. This was happening faster than I'd anticipated. That's kind of you," I managed. The doorbell rang. Perfect timing. Attorney Jeffrey Matthews stood on my porch, briefcase in hand, his expression appropriately somber. "Mr. Sterling, my condolences again. May I come in? I need to discuss Beverly's will with you." I led everyone to the dining room. Matthews was flawless, professional, respectful, giving nothing away. He opened his briefcase with the practiced ease of a man who'd done this 1,000 times. Beverly made arrangements before her passing. Matthews said, pulling out documents. Mr. Sterling, she's left you her entire estate consolidated into a trust fund worth $2.5 million. I kept my eyes on the papers, but my attention was on Chad. In my peripheral vision, I saw his eyes widen just a fraction barely noticeable. A flash of something crossed his face before he masked it with concern. But I'd caught it. Greed raw and hungry. However, Matthews continued, and I saw Chad lean forward almost imperceptibly. There is a competency requirement. Beverly wanted to ensure the funds were managed properly. If within 6 months you're deemed mentally incompetent by a licensed medical professional, the trust freezes for 10 years. But if you maintain competency, you have full control. Competent. I repeated, letting the word sit awkwardly on my tongue. Yes, I understand. Chad spoke up, trying to sound casual. What exactly constitutes competency? Ability to manage daily affairs, make informed decisions, comprehend financial matters. Matthews rattled off the requirements like he was reading from a textbook. Standard evaluation procedures. Beverly wanted to protect Douglas from potential exploitation. A muscle twitched in Chad's jaw. Just once. So fast most people would have missed it. Had Beverly suspected him even then? Or was Matthews improvising brilliantly, adding that last word like a knife slipped between ribs? Matthews gathered his papers after another 20 minutes of legal details. I'll check in with you next week, Mr. Sterling. Take care of yourself. After he left, I watched Chad's mask slip for maybe half a second. His eyes tracked the departing attorney's car through the window, and I saw it the predator beneath the concerned family man. He was calculating odds, measuring my weakness, planning his approach. $2.5 million. One old man, 6 months. He thought he'd found an opportunity. He had no idea he was walking into a trap I'd spent 3 hours setting last night. Dad, you should rest. Angela said, her voice tight with something I couldn't quite read. Guilt, fear, both. Yes. I agreed, letting my voice waver. I am tired. I retreated to my bedroom, leaving them downstairs. Through the heating vent, I could hear their voices, muffled but present. Good. If I could hear them, the recording devices I'd plant tomorrow would pick them up perfectly. That night, I lay in bed, listening to whispered conversation bleeding through the wall from the guest room. I pressed my ear to the plaster, careful to keep my breathing quiet. 3 days. Chad's voice low and urgent. That's all we have to get him to sign a power of attorney. After that, things get complicated with DeLuca. Angela murmured something I couldn't make out. I don't care. Chad's voice rose, then dropped again. We're too close to fail now. Do you understand? We're too damn close. I pulled back from the wall and reached under my pillow for the Nokia. Texted Edward. They're here. 3-day countdown. Performance successful. His response came within seconds. Stay safe. Be worried but trusts you. I typed back, tell her I love her and I'm winning. I set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. 3 days until Chad made his move. 3 days to survive and gather evidence. The recording devices were still in my car trunk. I'd plant them tomorrow morning when they thought I was just wandering around, confused. The trap was set. The bait was in place. Now I just had to stay alive long enough to spring it. Through the wall, I heard Chad's footsteps pacing. Back and forth. Back and forth. A caged animal running out of time. Good. Let him feel the pressure. Let him make mistakes. Because every mistake he made brought me one step closer to justice for Nicholas. One step closer to putting Beverly's would-be killer behind bars where he belonged. I woke the next morning to find my bedroom door locked from the outside. At first, I thought I was mistaken. I tried the handle once, twice. The lock clicked uselessly, the sound echoing in the quiet house. Day 1 as a prisoner in my own home. Chad's voice came through the door, smooth and concerned. Sorry about this. It's for your safety. You were wandering last night. We heard you trying to leave. Can't have you getting hurt or lost. I hadn't wandered anywhere. I'd been in bed all night listening to their whispered arguments through the wall. But I said nothing, just pressed my palm against the door, feeling the solid wood between us. They brought breakfast an hour later, stale bread and room-temperature water. Not enough to sustain a man my size, but enough to avoid the appearance of outright starvation. I recognized the tactic immediately. Deprivation, isolation, weakening the target. They'd underestimated one thing. I'd survived POW training in the military. I knew how to endure. I spent day 1 surveying the room the way I'd surveyed prison cells in training exercises back in '68. The floorboard near the radiator was loose. I discovered it when I stepped on it and heard the telltale creak. I pried it up carefully and found a hollow space beneath maybe 6 inches deep, perfect for hiding the recording device I'd smuggled in my jacket pocket yesterday. The window opened, though it was a 15-foot drop to the garden below. I tested the latch. Functional. An escape route if things went completely sideways. The radiator pipe could be detached with enough force. Heavy iron. Would make a decent weapon if I needed one. I wasn't helpless. I was preparing a battlefield. Angela brought lunch, more stale bread, more water. Her hands trembled as she set the tray on my nightstand. She wouldn't meet my eyes, wouldn't look at anything except the floor. Angela, I said softly, letting my voice sound weak and confused. She flinched like I'd shouted. I'm sorry, Dad. Chad says it's just until you're feeling better. Better. I let the word hang in the air between us. She fled without answering. After she left, I activated the recording device and slipped it under the loose floorboard. Any conversation outside my door would now be captured. Every word, every threat, every confession. Day 2 brought the same routine, minimal food, water, isolation. But I used the Nokia to text